move on because here are the big things coming up. So we got election coming up next year, right? 2024. It's going to be kind of a big one. But the big issue, of course, is abortion is going to be the biggest issue on the ballot that everybody's voting for, right? And we'll get into that in a second. The issue, though, that conservatives seem to keep pushing, which I don't understand, is transgender rights. They're very much against trans people having rights. And they're trying to pass, hundreds and hundreds of bills just this year, hundreds of bills to take away rights from trans people. And the lovely, lovely people at the Daily Wire, which is a conservative shill outlet that takes a lot of corporate money from conservative donors, they just produced a movie about trans women in sports. Oh yeah. Oh, you're gonna love this, Lacey. This just shows you what assholes they are.
In a world where women's sports is being transformed,
Ooh,
the Daily
transform.
Wire calls foul with the most triggering comedy of the year.
See how stupid that is?
Are you serious right now?
Yep. That's a real thing. They made a fucking motion picture. First off, I want to tell you this. As somebody who's done fighting and knows people who've done wrestling and stuff, we do it by weight class. So even if we're...
Yeah, there's like no way somebody that size is going to end up being put into a class with somebody that is as little as that.
No, there's no way. I used to do tournament martial arts when I was in college, and there's no way they'd put me in a ring with a guy who's 6'6", 240 all muscle. There's just no freaking way. 180-pound me, yeah, it wasn't going to happen. So that's just stupid. Oh, yeah, we're going to put a 120-pound girl in a ring with a 210-pound guy. Yeah, bullshit. But that's the whole premise.
They wouldn't put a 120-pound girl into a ring with a 220-pound girl. Like, they're not going to have people of those different weights, regardless of any gender or sex situation. They're just not. That's not how it works.
Well, it's just part of it is it's just they're running on this issue of trans people shouldn't have these rights and stuff, but it's wokeism or it's unfair or whatever. And they totally missed the plot of what's actually happening. But I want to show you one more little clip because this is just from the movie where they're pushing this that men can just now compete as women and we're going to win every time somehow.
All this now. My 8-year-old daughter told me all about it. So, a guy can become a girl with no physical changes at all.
Oh, that's called gender fluid.
So I can be a woman on the court and a man in the bedroom. I can't believe it's nice.
You mean when...
Okay, so no, you can't. That's the premise of this is they're misconstruing what's actually happening because it's been legal, especially like in the Olympics since 2003. They've had rules about transgender people competing, and the rules are pretty simple. It's you have to have a certain testosterone level. You have to have a certain, a certain level of transition. So it's not like
they evaluate it hormonally.
Right. So it's not like I can just decide I'm going to be a woman.
So we can't, put a wig on you and throw you into a women's sporting something.
Right. Especially like a wrestling match where I'm bigger than everybody. Plus, the issue, so like, here's a quick article, because they did restrict it a little bit more in the Olympics just recently. Which you can agree, disagree with. I personally think it's a little overblown, but I don't make the rules for the Olympics. So, but transgender athletes banned from track and field competition. That's actually a little off. So Semenya, who's this trans woman here, is actually a competitor Um, so she had been able to compete without restrictions in events outside the range of 400 meters through one mile, but will now have to undergo hormone suppressing treatment for 6 months before competing to be eligible. So that's it. They just changed the rules on how long she has to go through hormone therapy. So they're not saying you can't compete. So this whole but they spin it this way, like, oh, they're being banned, or because they're trying to create controversy, and it's like, what you don't
Can
realize.
we
Go ahead. Go
can
ahead.
we also can we just stop and just point out the absurdity and stupidity of the idea that they're taking a real issue
Mhm.
where real trans people are trying to find their way within sports
Sure.
and where their appropriate places, and they're turning it into some weird scenario where they're pretending that people are just sitting around being like, gee, I think so that I can play sports like this, I'm just going to, like, really? Okay, maybe there's some idiot somewhere doing something crazy like that, maybe,
Millions
because
of
you
idiots
know
in
what,
this country. Yeah.
they tell you on the preparation H bottle not to ingest it, and I'm sure it's because somebody decided to try to eat it, right?
Right.
But it's hard for me to believe that there are people sitting around being like, oh my god, I've got this really great idea, I'm just gonna like pretend to be trans so I can compete in this other way right now.
Right. That's what they're spinning. That's the whole bullshit.
But that's literally crazy. I feel like, we're going down this road of these other deeper issues, but I mean, we just need to even pause button on these deeper issues and say, how freaking stupid is it that they're even pretending that that's like, they're spinning it in this way that literally doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. I mean, there's the moral issue about, should an American citizen have equal rights to another American citizen? Yeah, that should be pretty much a given. The problem is this. So even this Olympic ban, it's not really a ban. It's just they just changed the conditions a little bit, right? That you have to meet to compete, but it only affects 13 runners and a couple swimmers. That's it for the entire Olympics. How many thousands of athletes? It's less than a tenth of a percent. It's like 100th of a percent. I mean,
Right.
it's nothing. So we're going to all this trouble, and we're making a movie about it and everything, and we're doing all these bans in all these states, right, to try and prevent this, when it's not even really an issue. There's not that many of them that are competing, and even then, the ones that compete, because they're on so many different hormone medications, it depletes their muscle mass. They don't compete as well once they transition, because they're going through massive body changes.
Right.
So I mean, this is not like they have a huge advantage here, right? Now, there's some argument about, well, if you grew up and went through male puberty, well, yeah, but you guys also want to prevent people who are trans from going through the puberty they want to go through. So, like, if I have a son and turns out, oh no, my son's actually a trans girl, right? And after years of therapy, this is not like this happens overnight. Years of therapy, a psychologist finally says, you know what, I think they'd be best on puberty blockers, right? We can put those on them, we'll put the kid on that. If then they're 13 or 14, they decide, yep, I'm a woman, I want to be a woman, then you can give them estrogen, put them through a female puberty, right? But we're not talking about this as an overnight process. We're talking about multiple therapists, multiple doctors, right? But at least the kid now grows up of the gender they wanted to grow up as, which is psychologically more stable for the child. Because when we do that, they're 17 times less likely to commit suicide.
I actually have a person in my life with a trans teenager who the other parent was not willing to sign off on the puberty blockers, and suddenly her trans son finally started menstruating and ended up having to be hospitalized for suicidal ideation, and like really it was really created a lot of issues there,
Right.
that were preventable. And this was not a short path. People say, oh, but they're so young. But you know what? This person in my life, at that point had been going through this since they were a small child, like years and years and years. And before a doctor will ever say that that's a good idea, it really needs to have had quite a bit of runtime,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, it's usually multiple therapists. It doesn't happen overnight. And you eventually got to get to a psychologist who can prescribe that.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody with a PhD, right, or an MD at least, but most of the time it's a PhD, a child psychologist. So this idea that like all of a sudden I'm going to go from, oh, well, I'm just going to put on a wig and compete. On top of that, it's like, even then, most guys, especially in these sports, swimming and running, it takes years to build up that kind of stamina to compete in those sports, right? So even if I put on a wig and started competing, just because I have more muscle mass doesn't mean I'm all of a sudden going to kick everybody's ass. I said, I doubt there's a woman competing for the Olympic team that I could beat in any track and field event. I mean, let's be fair. They're professional athletes.
You're going to beat exactly 0 of them.
Yeah, I'm going to get my ass kicked. It's like,
by every single one of them. So like, yeah.
well, it's like they did
That's
that. They did that episode of South Park years ago where the fat kid Cartman thinks he can compete and win money by competing in the Paralympics, right, for handicapped children.
Right.
And so he gets his mother to say that he's handicapped, even though he's not, right? And the whole thing is really ridiculous because he goes to compete thinking he's just going to tromp everybody and kick everybody's ass. And then he gets there and he gets smoked by all the handicapped kids because they're actual athletes that trained. you know? It just drives me fucking crazy that they don't think about that. I mean, let's see if I can bring up this clip because I wanted to bring this up. So, part of what kills me about this is Republicans are banning transgender people from competing in sports, but they can only do it for like public institutions, and they can't really do it for college because that's overseen by the NCAA, right? So those rules are set by a different organization, a private organization. The Olympics are a private organization, and they have their own rules and they allow people to compete, and they do it based on what the science says. But what we're saying is we're not going to let kids compete at the junior high school level because why? They never really give you a reason because they think it's unfair. And it's just ridiculous. Let me see if I can bring this up. This ad is not coming up. Or this video, sorry. I just think it's ridiculous because... hang on. Let's see that. The other thing about it, too, is I think the most common sport for transgender girls to compete in high school. You'll never guess what it is, Liz.
Track maybe.
Track is second.
Basketball?
Nope, cheerleading. And cheerleading is, it's like dance sport. I mean, it's graded by judges, right? It's like gymnastics.
Yeah, and why on God's green earth are we worried about that?
Yeah.
I teach in a high school, and we historically have had boys on the cheer squad.
Yeah. Well, and I remember there was. Well, yeah, I did.
No big deal.
Yeah, and there was a base to lift up the girls, right? but what was it? I mean, I can't remember what state it was where they were talking about this, and they banned, they did the whole transgender ban for transgender athletes in sports, and that's what it ended up being at the end of the whole thing. Is they got the ban through, they passed it, the governor signed it. I forget which one it was. It's just a real horrible human being. I'll have to look it up. But at the end of it, I remember reading in the article, this only banned one kid in the entire state. So we went through this whole legal process to keep one kid from joining the cheerleading squad. Like this was going to somehow, what, deny a bunch of other kids, scholarships or something. It was fucking ridiculous. So here's this is what I was looking for. ESPN they've done a ton of research on this because it's ESPN, right? But they talk about this here. This is sort of the science that the actual sports, athletic associations, the Olympics, the NCAA, professional basketball, baseball, all that. This is what they're going off of.
Testosterone is a hormone present in both males and females, but at vastly different levels.
Initiates some major changes in terms of size, strength, bone structure, hemoglobin levels, which are very important for endurance.
Testosterone increases protein synthesis, it increases growth of bones, it increases a lot of factors underpinning these changes in factor lean body mass and differences between the sexes in general.
Tommy Lundberg is a physiologist at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden and the author and co-author of some of the most influential studies on gender in sports.
Men have on average 40 to 45% more lean body mass or muscle mass than women have. And the differences in muscle strength are even more pronounced.
Even at the lowest end of the range in males, cisgender men, that is, those whose gender identity matches their sex at birth, still produce more than 4 times as much testosterone as cisgender women at the highest end of the female range.
Clarify that. So, just right now, right, Lacey and I, since we're both cisgender, right? Mm-hmm. Just by the fact that I'm male, I have more testosterone. I'm going to have more lean muscle mass. I'm going to be stronger, right? That's just a fact. Just in general. I mean, it's not 100% of the time, but most of the time that's the case. But here's what ends up happening when you're talking about a transgender person who's transitioning or has transitioned. And he's going to get into that because it changes this whole scale. Because right now you see the differences really dramatic. But this is a cisgender woman and a cisgender man.
So really testosterone drives these sex differences and is then a really good marker for whether you have undergone and benefited from a male puberty versus if you have not.
One of the key issues concerning transgender women athletes centers on those physical benefits that accrue as a result of undergoing male puberty, also known as testosterone-driven puberty. To compete in women's sports, transgender women are typically mandated to undergo hormone replacement therapy to reduce testosterone for at least 1 to 2 years.
We see in essentially all studies published on transgender women undergoing controlled therapy that they do reach female levels around 1 to 2 nanomoles per liters.
There is a reduction in muscle mass, muscle strength, muscle cross-section.
So there it is. So if you undergo transition, you're pretty much within the normal scope of a cisgendered woman for testosterone. So you don't have that advantage that they're claiming you have anymore. And if you catch it early enough, your kid doesn't have to go through the trauma of going through a puberty of a gender they don't want to, like we were talking about before. And then you don't even have the debate about, well, did they have an advantage because they went through male puberty? Because they didn't.
Right.
So you're spinning an issue for fucking no reason. And really, it's like we're making laws to prevent kids from competing in middle school and high school, which is less about them becoming professional athletes and more about them socializing and learning life skills. But when it comes to professional athletes and professional organizations, they don't have rules like that where it's just because of how you were born, because that doesn't make any sense. Because then why would we let LeBron James play basketball? He has an unfair advantage. It's huge. Why would we let Serena Williams play tennis?
Right.
So I mean, the whole thing is just stupid. But my point is that's what the right is. Their big issue is this equality thing, and it's like I still have to remind you, we're talking about less than 0.5% of the population, and of that 0.5%, even a smaller percent that actually want to compete in sports. And of that percent, even a smaller fraction of a percent that's going to ever even compete at sort of a professional level.
So I just want to take a second to loop this in a more direct sense to finance, in that let's also stop. Okay, there's the I want to win thing, but the conservatives are, or at least conservatives that are putting this stuff out, I won't label everybody, want to have us believe that people are competing, men are competing as women because they want to win
and make
right?
more money or
as
something.
One of their, well, let's stop. Can we come up with one sport where women make even close to as much money as men do? So, like, okay, even if we wanted to jump on board their crazy idea that suddenly it means that the trans individual is going to win,
right?
And they love to talk about men transitioning to women. They don't really talk about women that transition to men as much. So that's where I'm jumping in here.
Right.
But so they want to cut their pay. Oh, not even just in half. Like they want to
like
win, but they want to
basically
make 10% of what they could have made competing as a man, just so they can theoretically win. Like, that doesn't make sense in that arena either. Like, well, they're not even looking at their own argument in a way that's at all logical. I wouldn't take that deal if I wasn't actually a person who was actually legitimately transitioning. I wouldn't be like, right. Okay, so you mean to tell me now I'm going to be making 10% of what I did before? Never mind, forget it. Leave me over there. You know what I mean? Right,
but you're thinking about it rationally, like it would have to be a professional athlete who thought they were going to get an advantage. They're thinking about it as, Joe Schmo who's sitting on his couch eating potato chips could just put on a wig and all of a sudden he's going to beat the shit out of all these women who are professional athletes.
That also makes no sense.
That's my point.
It's really hard to spin this in any way that actually makes sense.
Well,
all the angles sound crazy.
Well, and one of these things is like, when guys bring this up and stuff, and I just saw this, and every time I've had this conversation, it's like, you didn't give a shit about women's sports until you can find something to hate about.
They don't care at all about women actually making an equal paycheck. They just want to make sure that no trans women go and compete, that only women that were literally born into biologically female bodies can win at the zero pay level. Right. Right? You're like, right. Why do you care now? So, well, Republicans, I just to transition, because we have a lot of time on that, but just to transition out, so that's Republicans. That's one of the big things they're running on, is preventing the 40 or 50, it's less than 100 trans women who might want to compete in sports professionally, right? They want to try to prevent that. That's what they're running on. Meanwhile, I think the Democrats are running